Tissue type. Locations. You could say
Hypodermis.
under the cutaneous membrane or simply hypodermis. Surrounds the kidneys. In fact, it's called the adipose capsule. It's in the back of the orbit for each eye. It's a little cushion, little pad of fat for the eyeball. Where else? That's just subcutaneous fat. Just concentrated there, but still subcutaneous. We have visceral fat, right, surrounding visceral organs, digestive organs, the heart. What would be the function of visceral fat? It's not insulation, it's not cushioning, it's not protection, because it's not like a big thick layer, it's just a little here, a little there, it's just kind of all over. Energy reserve, absolutely. So where is it providing insulation specifically? Which location is that?
That's your
Subcutaneous fat, yes, right under the skin. So that way we can keep more of the blood deep to that layer of insulation to retain heat, or we can move it superficial to that layer of fat to get rid of heat. And so what are the blood vessels called that are right there between the dermis and hypodermis that would determine how much blood is on either side of the fat? The cutaneous plexus. And when would we dilate those vessels? What would be the problem that would require us to dilate them?
low core temperature.
Hot or cold? Hot, right? A high core body temp. More adipose. This one? Reticular connective tissue. This one's from the spleen, which is a lymphatic organ. This stuff? Dense, regular. So they show a couple structures here. So it's not so much describe the location, it's more which structures are made of this stuff. Tendons and ligaments. But I think for consistency on the lab exam, I always phrase it as location. But for that, it's really the structures, tendons, ligaments.
Do we have to know which one's which? Like what connects what?
You should.
Okay.
And the answer is?
Tendons connect bone to muscle, ligaments connect bone to bone.
Right. What's this thing right here? That white sheet surrounding the joint. It's a joint capsule. What's it made out of?
Dense irregular.
Dense irregular. These little purple, thin, dark staining areas, those are nuclei of what cells? What if the cells are no longer dividing and secreting matrix? What are they now called? They wouldn't be fibroblasts anymore, they'd be fibrocytes. Either one. This stuff?
Still dense regular.
Still dense regular. Or dense regular elastic connective tissue. Right? Because it's still a regular pattern of fibers, it's just not collagen now. Instead, the dominant fiber is elastic. Right? It's all kind of coiled up there. So that tells you right now that tissue is not being stretched. Locations found. Walls of blood vessels, in particular arteries. What's the largest of arteries? Where this one is actually from?
Aorta.
It's from the aorta. I think I gave you something else too. Mm-hmm. Some cervical ligaments. Same stuff here. Dense, regular, elastic connective tissue, or simply elastic connective tissue.
That's dense irregular.
Now we've got dense, irregular connective tissue. Location? This one, bottom left, what location is this from? Joint capsule. Other locations. So here, it's the dense irregular connective tissue of the dermis, where it's called reticular layer of dermis. Here, what's it forming here? It's on the outside, right? This is the functional part of the organ. This is where things are happening. This is kind of a protective covering. What do you call that? Protective covering of an organ. What do you call the protective covering of the joint? Joint capsule. So this would be an organ capsule. Yeah. Lots of organs have organ capsules. This happens to be the testis. We're looking at blood, specifically clotted blood, and all the gray stuff is fibrin, sometimes called a fibrin mesh, a big web of fibers, and it creates the patch, right, that helps minimize blood loss through a ruptured vessel wall until it has a chance to regenerate. So you got some red blood cells in here, some platelets in there, all getting trapped in that fibrin mesh. The name of the protein that forms fibrin? Fibrinogen. So fibrinogen is a plasma protein. It's always there. When we need blood to clot, we just have to trigger the clotting reaction to convert it into fibrin. Hyaline cartilage. Describe the extracellular matrix of hyaline cartilage. Is it thick or water? Start with that. Thick because it has a lot of
Cartilage.
cartilage has a lot of cartilage. Proteoglycans.
There you go.
Do you see fibers? They're there. What kind are actually there? They're just kind of thin and fine and don't really see them under the microscope. They're collagen fibers. Yeah. They're just not organized into big rope-like bundles, not like you find like reticular layer of dermis. But they're there. But we describe the matrix as amorphic, right? Without distinct shape. So the A means without morphic shape. But if you see something that looks like hyaline but is a little more cellular and it does have visible fibers, then it would be elastic. And where do you find elastic? Pinna of ear, auditory tube, epiglottis. Cell type. Chondrocytes. Fiber type. Elastic fibers. What type of tissue is this on either side of that cartilage? DICT. That's the type. What's its name? It's here as well. I heard it. Perichondrium. So locations for hyaline.
Costal region.
So connecting ribs to sternum, or you can simply say costal cartilage.
It's found on the end of long bones.
Covers the ends of long bones, or you can simply say articular cartilage. Now, within a long bone, it's found in two places. The covering the ends of the long bone, and then actually within the long bone. So we'll get into these details in chapter 6. So you have hyaline cartilage here as articular cartilage. And then you also have, in a growing child, a layer here between the epiphyses and the diaphysis. or shaft. So here, layman's term, growth plate. Actual term, epiphyseal plate. This is the epiphysis, the ends of the bone. Right? The middle portion is the diaphysis. So these are the epiphyseal plates, right, between the diaphysis and the epiphysis. There's more. Nasal cartilages. Let's just go through the respiratory tract. So after the nasal cartilages would be, and we're going to skip pharynx, there's no cartilage there. So then it's laryngeal cartilages, followed by tracheal cartilages, followed by bronchial cartilages. What else? We get them all? There's a lot. Yeah, we did. All right, so which is this?
That's the,
Of all the locations we just went over, what's this one?
that's the covering of a long bone.
Yeah, so it's called? Instead of saying the covering of long bones, you can say articular cartilage. And articulation is a joint. Yeah, so chapter 8 is when we talk about all the joints, the shoulder joint, hip joint, blah, blah, blah. They're called joints or articulation. So articular cartilage is the cartilage in a joint. What's a joint? It's not that kind of joint, but this kind of joint. A&P joint? What is it? It's just a connection between two bones. That forms, you're literally joining the two bone ends together. That's what forms the joint or articulation. So like here, the shoulder joint, you would say the head of the humerus is articulating with the glenoid fossa of the scapula. The humerus and the scapula come together, kind of like this, right? And then you have a lot of motion here. That's the articulation. And the articular surfaces are covered in hyaline cartilage to protect the bone. That's where we get the name articular cartilage. This tissue type here, dense irregular connective tissue, name here as well, perichondrium. Well, this is a good one because we have a lot going on here. Tissue type, start at the top. This is the lumen of the trachea, so this would be, it is an epithelium.
Is it endothelium?
No,
No, it's not a
you're just throwing all the theliums down now.
it's not a mesothelium?
Think about where we are. This is the lumen of the trachea. Mesothelium is serous membrane, endothelium is vessels and heart. PSCC. Ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Right? That's what lines most of the respiratory tract, including most of the nasal cavity, most of the larynx, all of the trachea, and all of the larger airways. Right underneath that would be areolar connective tissue. And then these are glands, and they secrete a watery mucus. So what would you call these guys? Seromucous glands. And then we've got the cartilage, and we have the dense irregular connective tissue. So over here in the cartoon drawing, the red line is the mucosa. That's the mucous membrane, which is the epithelium and the underlying areolar connective tissue. And the name of that layer of areolar tissue is? It's a mucous membrane. Lamina propria, right? So then the yellow, that's the submucosa. We also find submucosa in the digestive tract. It typically is a bit more dense than the lamina propria. So typically it's a dense irregular connective tissue. And then we get into the cartilage itself. So we've got a lot going on in that image. About this one. So what are the cells? Chondrocytes, chondroblasts potentially, depending on if they're still dividing and secreting matrix or if they're just maintaining the tissue. You really can't tell from the picture so much. Lots of fibers. What type of fiber dominates? If it was elastic fibers, we'd call it elastic cartilage. We're calling it fibrocartilage.
Fibro.
Collagen.
Collagen.
Right? Fibrous connective tissues are dominated by collagen, and if it's not, that will be reflected in its name, like elastic cartilage. Type of tissue?
Dense irregular.
Looks like dense irregular, except there's chondrocytes. Still fibrocartilage. All right, what's being depicted here with these double-layered membranes?
Mucous membranes.
Oh, sorry.
Sure.
It's not like they're all double-layered. I should be more specific. All right, so this double-layered membrane is a serous membrane. How about around the lungs? Pleura, around the heart. Pericardium, or pericardial membrane, and then around some of the visceral organs, peritoneum. And then the blue is representing what over here? Mucous membrane. And then over here, cutaneous membrane. And so we've got our three types of epithelial membranes. For the serous membrane, what's the inner layer called, the one that lines the organ? Visceral. And the outer one that lines the cavity? Parietal.